I'm very happy to be here. More than happy, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to see all these intelligent faces looking at me. I hope I can live up to your expectations. I've been at this for 25 years now, and I never intended to get deeply involved with it. In all frankness, I did want to see an alternative methodology for people to have mutual aid without necessarily going to AA and NA, because in my experience as a physician, I found many people who either couldn't benefit from it or didn't benefit from it or wouldn't go to it for one reason or another. And there just was really no place for them to go. In that era, psychiatrists didn't want them, really didn't know how to help them. And there were very few so-called addictionologists around. None of them seemed to be very interested in what I was trying to start as an alternative. And eventually it fell into my lap that if I didn't get involved, it was going to die after I'd invested a lot of time and energy in...
Turn on the sound.
Okay, thank you.
You're on now.
Okay. After I'd put in a lot of time and energy in getting the thing started. So I eventually had to take over as facilitator at the first group. And as soon as I did that, I was very engaged, because I saw what a remarkable effect it was having on people, and how many people were there who didn't seem to get anything to resonate with them from a 12-step approach, and who were very enthusiastic about this approach. And a few weeks later, I got a call from somebody in Shrewsbury. Said he had a room in a library, wanted to get a meeting started there, and I said, oh my God, it's 40 minutes each way from Boston. But I went out there, and I started that group, and then 3 weeks later, someone called me from Falmouth. All these names are familiar to you, right? From Falmouth, said, hey, I have a room in the basement of the Falmouth Synagogue. Can you come out here and get a meeting started? And, well, what can I say? That was 3,000 meetings ago, 3,000. My wife's sitting over here. She's done 1,000, because she said, hey, I'll never see you if I don't start doing it. So, as you can see, I'm a workaholic. I've never had a personal substance abuse problem. But it's just thrilling to see what's come of this. We now have over 1,000 meetings worldwide, over 1,000. That's dwarfed by the 12-step, but it's number 2. And being number 2 in the world isn't bad in anything, probably. I want to start off in the beginning of the day, rather than talking a lot about smart recovery, what's happened, how it developed, where it's going, and so forth. When you're bright, cheery, you've just had your cup of coffee, you have a lot of energy, I want to do the hard work, the intellectual work. And at the end of the day, we'll talk about things that are easier and more fun to assimilate. So I'm going to start off with a technique called hierarchy of values. Now, we started off Smart Recovery. It was actually Ration Recovery. That's one of the alumni from that era here, up till 1994. Then we switched the name and the style of the program to Smart Recovery. And the reason was we weren't smarter than anyone else, but it was very difficult to find a name that you can trademark, a familiar name. That's why you have companies like Exxon and with 2 X's and 3M and so forth. So we came up with SMART, and then afterwards we backfilled the acronym to Self-Management and Recovery Training. It's kind of miraculous that it fit like that, but that's what we did. So the emphasis is a self-empowerment program, and it's an abstinence-oriented program. Now, like AA in its early years, they tried this, they tried that. They'd meet after the meetings, Bill W. and Dr. Bob and the other people. They'd sit around the table and they would decide, well, let's try this, let's try that, see what works. And over a period of about 10 years, they developed what crystallized as the AA program, and then the NA program, and it's sort of remained crystallized ever since. We're still in the developmental phase after 25 years. One reason is that we're science-based, and as science keeps pushing its frontiers out, learning more, getting more information, we add that to our program. So we're constantly adding tools, techniques and things like that, because if you're science-based and science isn't static, you have to keep moving too. Now, you may recall ration recovery only had two modalities, coping with urges and using REBT to solve your problems. Well, pretty early we got rid of that solving your problems because nobody can solve their problems, okay? There's too many and they're too complicated, they're too contorted. All we can do is handle them better. We can do better at handling our problems. We can react more adaptively to our problems. We can do things to reduce the intensity of our problems. But it's not mathematics, folks, so we can't solve them, you know? We don't say this is, I forget what theorem it is, some Russian mathematician figured out 3 years ago, some theorem or other, been bothering mathematicians for years. Actually, I think they're still not 100% sure that he solved it, but they're pretty sure now. Eventually, they may be completely sure, but we can't be completely sure we solve our problems in everyday life. So one of the things that early on I recognized as I began to read the literature, especially about stages of change, was that there might be people at a recovery meeting who didn't want to recover. Seemed paradoxical to me, but so I had a meeting we had just started in Brookline, Massachusetts. I decided to find out for myself. So there were 12 people there. It so happened that that meeting, everyone's problem was in the alcohol arena. And I took a poll. I said, how many people here want to stop drinking? You have to answer yes or no. So 8 put up their hands yes, and I said, how many don't want to stop drinking? And 4 put up their hands no. Okay? So I said to myself, this is crazy. What are people coming to a recovery meeting for if they don't want to recover? So what do you think? What are they doing there?
Easier, softer way.
Yeah, maybe they find a softer way of doing it. Any other reason? None of them had to have a paper signed, so no one was under legal coercion to be there.
Well, they want to drink moderately then.
Yeah, so there are people there who figure, well, maybe they'll show me how to drink moderately, although we say we're abstinence-oriented.
Are they in pre-contemplation, just want to examine and...
Well, if they were in
Quiet.
pre-contemplation, they wouldn't be there unless they were coerced. They couldn't be in contemplation, though, yeah. Any other thoughts?
Social club.
Huh?
Looking for a drinking partner.
Okay, well, that's not a good place to go look for a drinking partner. You go to a bar, yeah.
Social.
Social, under social coercion.
Yeah.
2 of them said that their spouse or their partner said if they don't stop drinking, they're going to kick them out. So that was 2 of them. And one of them said he's not sure he's addicted. He knows he has a problem, not sure he's addicted. So he came to the meeting trying to figure it out, see what other people are doing, how bad they are, and where they are, and so forth. And then the 4th person said he just wanted to see what it was all about, you know, in the preparation phase. So these 2 people are in the preparation phase. They know they have a problem, and they're taking the next step, actually doing something about it. Not necessarily stopping, but actually doing something about it. They've moved into the preparation phase. Now, these phases may take a long, long time. So, or they may be instantaneous. I know 2 cases where people had 1 blackout, they said that's it, and they never drank again for many, many years. I met these 2 because one of them brought his wife in because she developed the problem, and in the course of the check-in, it became clear that he had 1 blackout. I won't go into the details, but anyway, that was 35 years ago. He woke up in a town, he didn't know where he was or something, and that was it, and he stopped. He never had a drink for 35 years, but now his wife, retirement, bored, started drinking, brought her in. The other person wrote a book about her experiences. She's now the head of she called it the Functional Alcoholic Department at McLean Hospital, Harvard Teaching Hospital, and she wrote about it, so I can talk about it. And she was a high functioning alcoholic, tremendous, drank all the time, had one blackout, and said, no, I can't live that way, and that's it. She never drank again. So some people go from maybe even contemplation, maybe even she was probably in pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation, bang, right into total sobriety. Now, at another meeting, I was doing an introductory meeting. Maybe there's many people as there are here. So I used to go around, I'd go to the first person, I said, you go into a restaurant with 3 other people, you sit down at the table, the waiter comes over to the person opposite you, says, you know, what do you have to drink? And then I change it each time as they go around, or I'd say, they come up to you and say, what do you want from the bar? And then I'd ask people, how do you feel? And what do you do? What do you order? And it's keep varying this, and then it makes it interesting for people to see. We want them to become aware of their thinking process and so forth. So I was going around, I got about the 5th person, and I got around to him in my little scenario and said the other person, one had a Manhattan, one had a beer, and it comes around to you, what are you thinking and what do you order? He said, oh, I'm not thinking anything, and I order a black coffee. I said, well, do you have an alcohol problem? He says, no. I said, oh, I'll just go on to the next person. And I started to go to the next person because, you know, I assumed he came with somebody. And he said, but I used to have an alcohol problem. I said, oh, how long ago? He said, 25 years. And I said, well, how'd you stop it? He said, I killed a 5-year-old kid with my car. So there's a guy who went from pre-contemplation to total cessation, again, very quickly. But often it takes years and years. And of course, that's not an advisable way to do it. So we used to have a telephone. I was going to say in our office. We never had an office in Massachusetts. The office was in Barbara and my kitchen. And in the beginning, we could get, you know, average probably 40, 50 calls a week. Everything was done through the phone. And one day, phone rang, November of 1998, the phone rang, and I picked it up, said, hello, Smart Recovery. And I said, oh, yeah. He said, I live in Attleboro. I'd like to know where the closest meeting is. So I told him, and I said, how did you hear about Smart Recovery? He said, oh, I read about it in the newspaper. So this shocked me a little because when there was a newspaper article anywhere in Massachusetts, we'd get a lot of calls. And, you know, be a big flare-up, maybe 40, 50 calls, 100 calls over a couple of days. So we hadn't had any particular rush in calls. I said, oh, what paper was that? He said, the Boston Globe. That's the big paper in Boston, maybe 300,000 circulation. So I said, the Globe? I said, that article was July 27th, 1990. Okay? 8.5 years before. I know the date because we got 800 calls over the next few days. I remember it very well. One other date I remember very clearly, December 24th, 1990, because we knew there was an article going to come up about ration recovery in the New York Times. Do you remember that by any chance? But we didn't know exactly when they'd been, they'd interviewed, they'd taken pictures and so forth. And on December 24th, which of course is a very slow news day, papers have nothing much to write on that day, and Barbara went out into the driveway to pick up the paper, and I was having a cup of coffee, and I heard her screaming, and I couldn't quite make out what she was saying. I said, oh my God, she probably fell on the ice and hurt herself, and we went running out, and she was running up the driveway, holding up the paper saying, it's on the front page! It's on the front page! She didn't say above the fold, but that's a big thing with people, public relations. It was on the front page, and there was my picture in my office, right on the front page of the New York Times. They haven't paid any attention to us since, but anyway, that was a good start. So back to this gentleman. So he said, gee, was it that long ago? I said, yes. He said, you know, I read the article, and I decided that someday I may need this. Okay, so what phase was he in? Contemplation, yeah. Some damage, he knows he has a problem, okay, but he's not ready to do anything about it. So he tears it out, puts it in his desk drawer. 8.5 years later, he decides, well, I better do something about this. Who knows what happened in the interim? Nothing good, obviously. Things piled up. Got, you know, the pile of, you know what, SHIT got high enough now. He says, okay, time to look into things. Not time to stop, time to look into things, get some information. Within a month, that's the definition of the preparation phase. You plan to do something within a month. And he planned. I don't know what he did, if he really did anything outside of call on the telephone, but sounded serious, probably went to a meeting. So this is most often a long process as people go through it, and it fundamentally comes down to, I think, 3 possible ways that you enhance your motivation. One is they make you do it, okay? You're a physician, you're a dentist, you're a pharmacist, they get your license, they catch you coming in drunk or something, and, you know, stealing morphine from the medicine cabinet, and they say, this is it, you know, we got your license, we're going to be testing you, and blah, 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 okay? So the results are pretty good in those people, nurses, because they've invested many years in getting their professional license, and they're going to lose it if they don't toe the line, so they do. So that's one way. Some people get there by coercion, but I think we're talking about 5%. Now, others, the burden of long-term consequences reaches a level where it's just intolerable, and they decide, you know, I love this stuff, makes me feel good, makes me feel great, but it's doing this, and this, and it's beginning to crush me, and so I better look at. Usually they've tried moderation already, can't do it, and so they come and they decide to try to stop. They get into the action phase. But the third phase took me a long time to assimilate. The conflict between a person's values and what they're doing in relation to their addiction. I'm embarrassed. It took me 15 years to figure it out, but at least I finally did. And it all happened in the middle of a meeting. We had a fellow, I was running a meeting in Salem, Massachusetts, and there was a fellow who came, and 6 consecutive meetings he was there, and he was ambivalent. 2 directions, that's what it means, ambivalent, varying directions. Wanted to stop, but didn't want to stop, didn't want to know, couldn't stop, whatever. Anyway, this has been going on for 6 meetings now. And there were, clearly from his story that he told at check-in, there were many very good reasons why he should stop, but he just couldn't make his mind up. And when he started this kind of justifying and shilly-shallying, again, I could see that the people in the group were starting to get uncomfortable and resentful about this. And I could tell by the body language, you know, this business, that business and so forth, that, you know, things were maybe going to start getting hot in the meeting, which isn't where a smart recovery meeting should be going, because we don't tell anybody what to do. So I quickly was trying to think, how can I get this person to confront reality in a way that's, you know, more realistic without, you know, hammering on him in such a way that it's going to be coercion. And it just jumped into my head the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, Maslow was a brilliant psychologist, and he evolved this. He got interested in normality. What is normality? And normality isn't what the average person does. Average people are not normal. Normal people are normal. 10% of the population, according to Maslow, not including me, so I can be objective about it. So, and they react in a different way than the average does to the trauma of everyday life and the developments of everyday life. And he evolved this concept of hierarchy of needs, that there's certain things that are absolute needs: oxygen, water, food, and protection from the elements in a temperate climate. You know, the Amazon basin, you can walk around naked, and make any difference, but around here, don't try it. I found that out in Edinburgh. So, and then, but he also included in needs things like, you know, love, socialization, intellectual stimulation, bodily activity, things like that. Albert Ellis had a little different take on it. He said, well, yeah, those original four are needs. The others are all wants. Now that's a little bit of it has a tinge of Buddhism in it, where Buddhists would say the same thing, that a perfect Buddhist is actually isolated from the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and the negatives of the universe and so forth. You simply become immune to them. And in Ellis's point of view, you should distinguish between the things that you absolutely need and the things that would be nice to have, but they're not essentials for preservation of life. There's a difference. So I said, well, I'll use that structure, but I'll change the terminology, hierarchy of values, because I saw that this fellow's values were conflicting with his desire to have access to alcohol whenever he wanted it, and he didn't see it. He didn't see it that way. So I was going to try to move him to see if I could change his perspective on this. He came to the meeting because his doctor had detected that his liver tests were abnormal. And he tried various ways to moderate. One way was to drink only on occasions. So what's an occasion?
Wedding.
Wedding?
Yeah.
Monday. Okay. No, not usually Monday. Thursday's an occasion, not usually Monday. Monday's when you're recovering from the occasion. Anything else?
Birthdays.
Birthdays,
Well,
anniversaries, so forth. And it started off that way. Anniversaries, birthdays, July 4th, Christmas, and pretty soon Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, and so forth, and all over again. The cycle would go all over again. So he tried that a couple of times. And he also, his favorite activity was going to Italy. He was a fairly wealthy, retired lawyer in his 70s, and he loved to go to Italy. The whole family went to Italy every year. But he didn't go this year. When his doctor told him about the liver problem, he canceled. He had already paid for the trip. He canceled it. Why?
Because he couldn't drink wine.
Because, even better than that, he said, what good is a trip to Italy if you can't have a glass of wine with dinner? Okay? Anybody here from Italy? Well, I'll tell you, Italy's okay even without a glass of wine with it. And anyway, you can't get a glass of wine. They'd say, what? What are you talking about? Crazy Americano? A glass of wine with dinner? I mean, there's no such thing in it. It's a bottle. Nobody ever heard of ordering a glass of wine. So anyway, this is the information we knew about him. So I said, I want you to list in rank order of importance your values. So he said, 1, his wife, loved his wife. 2, this is odd, his sisters. Now he's very close to his sisters. They always lived together in a little area in Salem. They were in each other's houses all the time. They did everything together. They went to Italy together. So he said, number 2, his sisters. Number 3, his kids. He had 2 kids, grown kids. Number 4, he said his health. And number 5, important value, trips to Bella Italia. Okay. Now, what's the next question I asked him?
Where's alcohol?
Where's alcohol here in this list? And he said, alcohol isn't a value. I said, how about access to alcohol? Is that a value? No, he said. I said, what's your wife think about your drinking? He said, she hates it. We argue all the time about it. How about the sisters? Same thing, they beg me to stop. How about the kids? Ditto. How about your health? That's self-explanatory. How about the trips to Italy? I canceled because of alcohol. I said, okay. Sounds to me like alcohol is a value. It's conflicting with every other value on your list in a very serious way. And of course, I mean, we all know, you know, when he was drunk, he was happy. Everybody else wasn't happy, and then he doesn't remember what the hell he did. Everybody else is a Puritan, and they don't want a guy to have fun, and so forth and so on. And this is how it goes, year after year after year. So anyway, this is the list. The list is a little different than he put down. So that's it. Using motivational interviewing, we dropped it there and we moved on. But the next meeting, we did the check-in, and he said, I've decided to stop drinking. So I said, sounds like a good idea. Sounds like a reasonable idea. Anyway, that's how it went. As far as I know, he did stop. And I said, wow, this is pretty potent. Now, I've done this about 100 times, over 100 times. And the amazing thing is, 98% of the time, 97% of the time, people never mention the substance or the behavior with which they are totally obsessed and which is screwing up their entire life and all of their activities and their social commitments and their health and their finance and everything else, never mentioned in their list of values. So there is a fundamental dichotomy, a split in how people think about this. They obscure, they obstruct the reality of the impact of their behaviors on what they say is important to them as a defense mechanism against the recognition of it. When you recognize it, then you know it's time to stop it. Now, I couldn't figure out for a long, long time how do people do this? I mean, this is kind of dramatic. Now, I did have a few people who mentioned abstinence or sobriety, but very few. Matter of fact, 5. Maybe I did 110 times. Only 5 people ever mentioned anything to do with the substance or the behavior. That's pretty amazing. It's as if it didn't even exist. And yet they're at a recovery meeting and it's a fundamental problem in their life. So I found out that the reason 4 of them mentioned it was because I provoked it. I provoked it by saying, who wants to do an exercise? Okay? So who do you think volunteers?
The most motivated person.
Yeah, the people who are really motivated, and they're really doing it, you know? And I found this out when I was presenting this to our, we have a training every month for our facilitators in Massachusetts, and I presented this and said that, you know, he said, you know, I tried it this week, and the first thing the man said was abstinence. And of course, that's not what you want people to do, because this is a way to change their focus on things. So if they start off with abstinence, well, they already got the punchline. So the joke's over, right? So I couldn't figure this out. You know, he tries it the first time, and the person comes up and says abstinence. But driving home, I figured it out. He did what I had done twice, and both times at a Center for Homeless Addicted Men. So think about that. Homeless addicted men. These are really the people who have totally hit bottom. And they're getting like 8 hours a day of meetings and social workers and everything else. So abstinence is the first thing in their mind, and the second thing is they know the lingo, and they know what the counselors want to hear and everything else. And maybe sincerely they're saying, if I don't have abstinence, number one, this is what my life is going to be. I'm down the drain. Incidentally, we don't have old drug addicts in the U.S. This was interesting. It's one of the beauties of circulating internationally. So because here people can get the drugs made by pharmaceutical manufacturers, whereas in the U.S. most people who are addicted to drugs are getting street heroin. So, you know, we have more deaths from heroin overdoses than from automobile accidents now in the U.S. So, I mean, there's almost no such thing as an old drug addict. When I was a resident in Bronx Municipal Hospital in the 60s, we had a drug addict there, a heroin addict, was 50 years old. And I saw one of the residents, other residents came down, he came up to me, he said, "Hey, Joe," he said, "where's this 50-year-old drug addict?" You know, I said, "Well, in that room over there." And he went over and he, you know, whoa, you know? I mean, this is a rara avis in America. So the destructiveness of this is much more evident. So in this place, I had asked, who wants to do this exercise? This is just a mistake. So you only want to bring this out when people are ambivalent. They're not getting out of the preparation phase, and they just can't make their minds up, and they're going back and forth. You've heard their story, you know it's terrible, it's awful, it's obnoxious, it's destructive, it's life-threatening, and they just can't step over that line. It's a very difficult line to get over. So this is when you can bring this out. Now, it seems to be universally, now that people say this is a powerful tool. Two of the people on our board currently in America say this is what turned them. This is what finally got them to say, hey, this is totally destructive. I can't do this anymore. So now, there were some other interesting developments here. I did this once. Every time I do it, I learn something. Incidentally, people don't say, I say, what are your values? People don't say democracy, freedom, right to vote, diversity, equality. No, they never mention those things. The personal, they seem to take it as it seemed to relate it to their personal, intimate life. Sometimes we get career, number one. Seen that 3 or 4 times. Must be, of that 110 people, 30, 40 must be religious. Never mentioned. One mention of religion, and that was a guy who was learning Greek so he could read the Bible in the original. I didn't disabuse him that the Bible wasn't originally written in Greek, but anyway, that's close enough. That's, you know, 2,400 years, that's close enough. So, so there is a subtle understanding of what this means to people. Now, I did have one person in a prison who did it, and he said, number one, career. He built 2 businesses and crashed them both through alcohol. And then he said financial stability, obviously important to him. 3, romantic relationship. And 4, he said abstinence. So what do you think about that one?
Without abstinence, he loses all the others.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So I said to him, his name was Joel. He's now running a group, a smart recovery group in a minimum security prison. He graduated from the felony prison. So I said, hey, you know, why did you make this number 4? He said, well, I know it should be number 1, he said, but I don't think I can do it. So I put it number 4. Well, that's an interesting object. We had a little discussion about that, but you know, I think the whole group agreed that if it wasn't number 1, it wasn't going to happen. There's no point writing it down at all if it's not number 1. So, and again, these are the very rare instances of what people do. Now, I tried it. I do an introductory meeting at a hospital every week. And at the end of the meeting, I like to leave 10 minutes. I explain to them what it's all about, where the meetings are, and all about the web meetings and so forth. And then I like to leave 10, 15 minutes. I said, would you like to do a tool? You'll get an idea what goes on at a meeting. And everybody said, yeah, okay. So I said, was there anybody here who isn't sure about whether or not they want to stop whatever they're doing? And this young man put up his hand. He said, yes. So I figured he was about 25 years old. And he had an interesting history. He said, I drank too much. I had a lot of problems with alcohol. So 2 years ago, I stopped. And I haven't had a drink since. Which does point out the fact that we know that about 30% of people with serious alcohol problems, what we call scientifically alcohol dependence, which is commonly known as alcoholism, there's certain criteria, and they fit the criteria. 30% of people do it on their own. It's very important to remember that. They never show up in recovery groups, they never show up in the doctor's surgery, they never show up in the social worker's office or the psychiatrist's office. They just decide to stop finally. May take 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 attempts, and then they stop. May have help from their family, their boss, whatever, but they never show up on our radar. You can only find them through huge random surveys. The last NIH survey surveyed 18,000 people to pick this up. So they found about 30% of these people stopped on their own. It's very important because it exemplifies what we're trying to say, that people have the capacity to get over addictions. It's inherent. You have a capacity to get into addictions, but I have the capacity to get out of addictions. So this fellow hadn't had a drink for 2 years, but he was using a lot of marijuana, and he wasn't sure whether he wanted to stop. Now, he was in this group, so something had happened, I don't know, legal or otherwise, or the family or whatever. I didn't go into it. But he said, gee, you know, all my friends use it, and I go out with them, and I go to a party, and everybody's using it, and so on and so on. He said, you know, I know it's probably not a good idea, and I know I have a tendency maybe to get addicted, but I'm not sure whether I want to stop. So when I said, okay, let's do this little exercise, I explained to him what hierarchy of values was. It was interesting. Number one, he said, loyalty. This is the last one I'm going to do. Loyalty. I did it over 100 times. I never heard this. Okay, never. So I said, loyalty to your family, loyalty to your friends, loyalty to your country. He said, loyalty to my friends. So I said, how old are you? He said, 19. So that explains it, right? They say, who do you respond to when you're 19? Your peers. So that was interesting. So I thought he was going to put family number 2, but no. Number 2, he put courage. So this is what's important to 19-year-olds, showing your friends that you're macho, that you're one of the boys. You can, you know, do, especially after he stopped drinking. He sort of had something to prove, that he wasn't some kind of wispy character, you know, some shilly. So this was interesting. You know, I dare you to do this, they do it. That's what teens do, you know. They know, and their friends know how to get them to do it. 3, he said, finally he got around to the family. 4, he couldn't think of a 4. So I said, well, do you ever worry about, do you ever think about your health? I said, have you ever heard that chronic use of marijuana may have some, you know, destructive effect on your brain? The pathology, cause certain pathology in your brain long term? He said, no. I said, well, do you ever think about your health? He said, no. He said, you know, when I'm 30, I'll worry about that. So again, a very characteristic, you know, behavior or thought process of people probably under 20. So, so obviously you have to, this shows why we have teen groups. Because they just think differently. They operate under a whole different set of criteria and values than we do. Now, I just want to take a last minute to show you an element or a type of this approach which can be used for a group. This is only useful for an individual. Incidentally, one of the people, when I did it at this training, he said, well, this is just a trick. You're just trying to trick people. Well, you know, it is, in a way, it is a trick, right? I mean, you know how it's going to come out. They don't know how it's going to come out. But so it's very important not to say, gotcha, we got you. We caught you with your pants down. You did. No. I mean, you know, that's from a motivational interviewing perspective, that's not prudent. We don't grab them by the scruff and we're going to rub your nose in this, you dumbass, you didn't think of alcohol. No. It just let it seep in. If they're receptive, it'll seep in. And if they're not, it won't. And you don't make a federal, we call it a federal case out of it. So one of our facilitators came up with this idea for group. She said, well, let's do an HOV for the group, and let's write down all our values. So now it's interesting. As a group, you get a different set of values. Here's the kind of values you get. Integrity, honesty, reliability, passion, freedom. So it's interesting, in a group situation, people generalize it. And I've been where we had 15 different values down. And then we go around and we ask the question, how does an addiction affect your integrity? That one's easy. How about your honesty? How about your reliability? How about your family? How about your passion? How about your freedom? Okay, so we end up always with everything crossed out. So I think this is powerful as well. They see that all these things that they claim to be important to them and valuable to them are suppressed and subverted by the addiction. So anyway, that's this approach. I think we don't have any data on this, but the general concept seems to be that it's a very powerful motivator for people. Okay, going to end there. Time for one question?
One question.
Or comment or critique. So you see, critiques have been very valuable in how we developed this and how we did it. So we're open to critiques.
Does a hierarchy of value become a dynamic thing like the CVA does, where it changes over time as the person changes, blah, blah, blah? Or is it pretty much a one-off kind of thing?
Well, I mean, a person could keep doing it, but it really, the impact is a one-time thing. Once you do it, if you've done this, and you have to admit to yourself all of this detrimental impact on the things that you say you value highly, I think that's it. You either accept that, and that becomes part of your thinking process, or you just go back to pushing it into the need category. Jack Trimper used to do presentations, and people say about rational recovery, well, is this a cure? Can you cure people? And he said, you're cured when you don't drink, no matter how bad it gets. Okay? So that's really, either you recognize that ethos or you don't. If you always going to consider it in the need category, it's there if you need it. If things get bad enough, I got this little hip flask hidden in my, tied to my leg with an elastic, just in case things really get bad. Then obviously you're not over the problem, So either you take it out of the need category or you don't take it out of the need category. And that's really the ultimate question. Now, it doesn't mean on doing it one time somebody will get this, but hopefully it gets a little circuit going in your brain that changes the way you view it. And you see that incontrovertibly it is destructive to your values. There's no way to get around it by cognitive tricks. That's really either you do or you don't. Last question. Okay.
It was just only a few weeks ago we were doing this in a group, and we got to the point where this individual did say, yes, wow, alcohol is the problem here. But then somehow the discussion went on to, but I don't need to put abstinence as my new #1 value, because there was a time in my life when I was able to control alcohol. It wasn't a problem. So my goal, if you like, is to return to the point at which I could control it. I don't need to stop it, I just need to be able to control it. And that went, you can imagine the discussion after that.
Okay, yeah. Look, it's the old, you can lead the horse to water thing, okay? And this is the hope, probably of what, 90% of people who know they're in trouble. The hope is they can go back to where they were. I mean, nobody starts off. Some people maybe do. I mean, there's people who said, I had my first drink when I was 14 and it put me in heaven. And that was it. I've been oblivious to everything else since. Most other people work their way into it. Nobody starts off with a drug or alcohol with the desire to become addicted and the plan to become addicted, right? That's not part of the plan. You have to work at it, and you get there. And then something changes in your brain. Whatever it is, something changes, and you no longer can do this. Now look, 1 or 2% of people who are addicted can go back to social drinking. But there's 98% trying it all the time. We have to be, we tell the truth. The scientific facts are clear. 1 or 2% seem to be able to go back to permanent social drinking. But there's millions of people trying it and very few succeeding. So it's a little bit, I call it like Russian roulette with a revolver has 50 chambers in it and 49 bullets. And you spin around the revolver and you put it to your head and you pull the trigger and you expect it to go click. Okay? There's 49 bullets in one hole, and you spin it around and you expect it to go click. Well, is that a good? Is that good odds? Is that a good idea? It also says something else. It says clearly that access to alcohol is the most important consideration in my life, and always will be. It's not just whether they put alcohol first or not. It's not, putting it first means that it is the most important thing in my life, and that my life will be bereft and I will be despondent if I cannot have that. I mean, that's what it means. A person is saying, my life will never be complete, will never be full, will never be satisfying if I don't have access to alcohol. And if you believe that, as long as you believe that, either you're not going to stop or you're not going to have a happy sobriety. That's all. And again, all we can do is point things out to people. We don't tell them what to do. You have to be very careful. We know the science is clear and it doesn't work, antagonizes people. So there's 2 reasons not to use it. Okay, thank you.